Hi, my name is Stephen Carr, and I'm here to talk about history hunting. History hunting is a avocational form of archaeology, and what we do is we take moments in the past of America's history, and we try to prove them by locating artifacts. And we're on the area of the Loxahatchee Battlefield. The Loxahatchee Battlefield was two 1838 battles that were fought between U.S. soldiers and Seminole Indians, and it was fought right here. We heard the stories of the battle many years ago, but nobody had ever proven where it actually happened. So in the early days, there were people that were scanning all the way from the middle of Palm Beach County all the way to northern Martin County, looking for the Loxahatchee Battlefield. One of those people that I became closely associated with was Jeff Whitman, and he was hunting long before I was. And I have Jeff Whitman here to my left, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself and how he got involved.
My name is Jeff Whitman. I grew up here. Back in the early 1980s, I was dating the granddaughter of Bessie DuBois, John and Bessie DuBois, and they were one of the oldest pioneer families in Jupiter, and the granddaughter lived with John and Bessie. So I would go up every night, and John and Bessie would cook me dinner. She had a restaurant right on the Loxahatchee River, and unfortunately it was torn down, but it was right on the river, and she loved to cook. So I would come up every night, and she would cook me like a 4 or 5 course meal with the granddaughter, and John and Bessie would regale me with stories of old Jupiter. And one of the things that Bessie had, she had a lot of artifacts in her house, but as a matter of fact, the house was almost in the shadow of the Jupiter Lighthouse. It was right on DuBois Road. And she had a map, 1856 map, the Ives map. And the Ives map was done by Lieutenant Ives in 1856, and it was the Geological Survey of the South Florida, the battle sites, and the forts. And on the map, it had the Battle of Loxahatchee. And I asked her and John, I said, well, do you know where the battle is? And they said, no, we don't know where it is. She said, Trapper knew where it was.
That's
but, Trapper Nelson.
Yeah.
But all they knew was it was where the Seminoles forded their cattle across the river. So that kind of piqued my interest, and that was in the early 1980s. And so I started looking for it with my friend Kevin Moranville. And we looked and looked and looked. We went all the way from the inlet, all the way out to Jupiter Farms. And you got to remember, back in the 1980s, this was wild country out here. The Loxahatchee River, where it had been channelized on the Reefs property, the alligator poachers still had the ropes hanging over the river from the oak trees with the gang hooks on them, with chickens on them, and we would go along in the John boat and cut the ropes down. That's how wild it was out here. And we looked all the way from the inlet all the way to, like I said, Jupiter Farms, and most people, as the crow flies, it's only maybe 4 or 5 miles. But if you look at all the twists and turns in the river, it's more like 15 or 16 miles. And we went all the way along the river and past the turnpike, east of the turnpike, and everybody thought that the battle site was in Jonathan Dickinson Park, because Jacob Rhett Mott, who wrote a book, Journey into Wilderness, he was in the battle of the Loxahatchee, and he stated that Jessup and the soldiers crossed the Loxahatchee River from the north bank to the south bank, and then crossed back again with the dead soldiers and buried them on the north side of the Loxahatchee River. And the only place where and he also said the Loxahatchee River at that point was 30 yards wide. Well, the only place where the river is that wide and runs from east and west is in Jonathan Dickinson State Park. And that's where they put the marker, and that for a long time, I guess the marker was back there in the 60s, as I remember it. That's where everybody pretty much figured that the battle was, but it really wasn't. And what happened was, in 1991, the county bought the property from the Reeses. Tommy, I knew Tommy was a friend of mine, and we had actually done work together on real estate deals. And the county had bought the property from the Reeses, and they came in and they with a front end loader with a rake on it, and they started pulling out the exotics. And I said, oh man, we got to get out there. So Kevin and I and Steve, we called up Steve and said, Steve, man, now's the chance. Kevin and I had been on the property probably 10 years earlier, and we did not find anything because the underbrush was so thick. And so Steve and Steve was using an old metal detector, and it could not determine ferrous from non-ferrous, so he was digging nails and horseshoes and everything. And Kevin and I had the better metal detectors. And God bless him, man, Steve, man, he was digging up, he was working harder than all of us, and he was digging, like I said, iron, and what happened was he started digging up grape shot, and that was just incredible. And then we started finding musket balls, 69 caliber musket balls, and as far as I know, we were the first ones to actually find artifacts from the battle site. There were other people that said they had theories about where the battle was and stuff, but nobody had definitive proof that that was the battle site. And so we got together, and we actually went to, we brought in an archaeologist, Robert Carr, and we showed him the grape shot. And he said that was definitive proof that this was the Battle of the Loxahatchee. And we also brought in another man named Richard Persick, and we told him where the battle site was. And together with him, with Richard, we met with Bob Carr, and we took him out to the battle site, and we showed him exactly how the battle progressed. And basically, our theory is that they came down, Jessup and his soldiers came down the Van Swearingen Trail, and basically it's the old Indiantown Road grade, and it came right through and crossed the river right where the battle was. And
the bridge?
The bridge, yeah,
right,
the
right.
bridge.
The battle was...
The battle was right at the
right
bridge.
about where the bridge was.
Yeah.
That was where most of it was fought.
So we took Richard Persick and Bob Carr and Bill Steele, and we walked them through the battle site, and we showed them where we found the musket balls, where we found the grape shot, and it was all on the southwestern, yeah, it was.
It cuts on the river there, so it would be on the northwest, northwest, because the river cuts and makes a turn to the north. So it was in that loop.
The loop there, yes.
It was in the loop that starts in the run that goes east and west for about, what would you say, 100 yards?
Yeah.
And then it makes another almost a 90-degree heading north.
Yeah.
So in that loop, that it would be a salient.
Yeah.
Almost like a salient. That's where we started finding
and
those.
There was a tremendous amount of pressure from politicians that the battle site not be found, because there's a problem with concurrency, and the big developer owned thousands of acres west of here, and to get concurrency they had to widen, straighten Indiantown Road. So all I can say is there was a tremendous amount of pressure, political pressure. Steve, Kevin Moranville, and myself, and Mike Daniels all were threatened with arrest, and it really got bad. That's all I can tell you is it really got bad. And Steve had deputy sheriffs follow him to his house and stuff. It just got really bad. Steve was extremely bad, extremely brave. Issa Bryant was another person that helped save the battle site. I did want to say that there are 5 or 6 people that were the original people that were looking and found the battle site. Kenny Hughes was an early pioneer. There was me, Kevin Moranville, Steve Carr, Mike Daniels, who was a really good archaeologist, and Graham Halls. And between the 6 of us, we pretty much all found it about the same time. It was in April. I think Mike said it was April 14th of 1991. I'm not sure if he was there before us or after us, but we were all there the same week when they brought in a front end loader with a rake, and started pulling out the Brazilian pepper. But we found a ton of artifacts. Steve graciously donated a lot of them to Palm Beach County and we don't know what happened to him. But we felt that we helped save the battle site. One of the commissioners wanted to turn this whole park into a golf course. Thank God we stopped that. There are also plans for a travel trailer park, a motorhome park.
Yeah, you know, I'm just going to kind of mirror most of the things that Jeff said regarding how it was found. There really wasn't any plan, any official plan to find it, and that's really, to me, what made me more aggressive in finding it. In other words, the county wasn't actively looking for this battlefield, and that always bothered me. And what Jeff said rings so true, is that developers wanted to increase the density out here. To the west of us, what they wanted to do was to develop multiple homes, and the density in what's known as Jupiter Farms now is I think it's an acre per home today. And back then the developer said, look, we need to get that density, we need to change those density levels, and the way we do it is we build a recreational facility here that meets recreational concurrency. They need road concurrency to get approval from the state. They need police and fire concurrency to get approval from the state, and they need a recreational facility so the people of West Jupiter can come and have a place. So they were going to develop this park into golf courses, travel trailers, soccer, baseball, boy, you name it.
Motorhome park.
Motorhome park, yeah. They had all kinds of plans. It was going to become a regional county park. So it really became important for us to prove that it was too important to use it for those things. And so not only were we fighting against the county, but we were fighting against developers who wanted to push forward this plan. They wanted to push forward even after Bob Carr, the archaeologist, came out here with a team and designated this. He designated 51 state file historic sites within here. And the most sensitive ones are actually where the road is today. He had recommended no development on the area, which is where the major part of the road runs through the park today. So that shows you, even they who paid for the archaeological survey didn't follow the recommendations of the archaeologists. So it was up to us to do something to save this park, and that's really where Asa Ham Bryant comes in. Asa Ham Bryant was a descendant of Black Seminoles. His ancestors actually fought here, were removed from here, and were taken to Oklahoma. Asa was the director of the Florida Black Historical Research Project, and he and I met and we talked about doing something to preserve this park. I wasn't too sure what we could do, but what Asa did was he started a memorial service out here in 1992, was the first memorial service. But the county wouldn't allow us to have it in the park, so we had to have it across the road on the river, on the Loxahatchee River. But because of Asa and the Florida Black Historical Research Project coming in and beginning that ceremony, that was a ceremony that we continued, and it continues even to this day. Every January around the 15th, the weekend closest to the 15th, in the month of January, they have the Seminole Maroon Remembrance Ceremony that Asa Bryant started in 1991. I was with him that day, and I think it was that ceremony and then repeating that ceremony every year. Eventually, they did allow us to have the ceremony in the park. Asa came and walked this entire park. He walked the whole 660 acres. And where we're sitting right now is the place Asa selected to have the ceremony, this spot right here.
He walked it barefoot too.
He walked the entire park barefoot. Yep, that was in the nature of from his Seminole ancestors. He was going to come, and he wanted to find the spot of learning. He wanted to find a place where he could teach from, and this is the spot that he chose. So we look at this as sacred ground. Now, Isa passed away in 2007, and we miss him dearly. You know, but he really founded this. He's the one who, I believe, gets credit for preserving this park. Others, like Richard Prozick, went to the county to lobby on behalf of preserving the park, but there were a lot of people that worked, and we don't want to leave anybody out. But Jeff and I really, we go back to the mechanics of the park. We go back to finding actual evidence that proves that it was the battlefield. Once that was done, then we had to switch from being amateur archaeologists to full-time preservationists. Jeff?
One of the things that messed everybody up was the motte, and it talks about it in the archaeological survey. Here's the first archaeological survey. It's about 1,000 pages. Here's the second archaeological survey. It's a third of what the original one was. And what messed people up was that Mott said that the Jessup and his soldiers crossed from the north bank to the south bank. Well, like I said, the only place that could be was in Jonathan Dickinson. But what actually happened, what we figured out, was that the Reeses needed to drain the land for their citrus. All the citrus is gone now, but when Steve and I were here in the early 1990s, there was citrus all over the place. And what the Reeses did was they channelized going out the river, going out towards Jupiter Farms, and the prong that came out and went west pretty much dried up, and then it filled in with leaves. So you can still see the western prong of that bank, and that's where we found all the relics, was on the north side of that dried up riverbed that since has filled in with leaves and trees, and it's hard to really see it, but it's there. And that's why people had a hard time trying to figure out where the battle site was. Like I said, Steve was using an old metal detector, and he was digging nails and grape shot. And that was the key. And the other thing we were digging was Congreve rockets. And here's the base of a Congreve rocket, and Mott talks about this extensively in his journal. And it was, this is the base plate. This actually came from Fort Jupiter. So it could have been the retreat of Powell at his battle, or it could have been just Jessup's trying to signal supply boats. But a Congreve rocket, this had a cast iron head and a tube, cylinder tube, sheet metal, and then it had a base plate with a vent hole in it. And this, you can see the vent hole's blown out. It had a square 1 inch hole in the base. And there's actually a tube, kind of like a mortar. And that's what they were firing. That's what Jessup was mainly firing, canister and Congreve rockets at the Seminoles. And we always think that it was a delaying tactic. The Seminoles were trying to get their families out of here safely. And they fought extremely hard and extremely bravely against over 500 soldiers. Actually, how many was it? 1,500?
1,500 when you count the volunteers.
Yes.
with the regular U.S. troops.
And the Seminoles, counting their black Seminoles, were probably about 500 in number. But they put up a tremendous fight and were able to get their people out of here and in safety. But unfortunately, most of them had to return back because they were starving. After the battle, the Seminoles had been here with villages for a long time before the battle.
And so what we have done is we've looked at things, new information that's become available. And one of the things Jeff noted was that when Lieutenant William Powell came here with about 100 soldiers and sailors in the first battle of the Loxahatchee, they discovered when they disembarked from their boats on the Loxahatchee River near where the lighthouse is today, they discovered an old woman tending a very large herd of cattle. And Jeff pointed out to me that if the Seminoles came here from Okeechobee, and the Battle of Okeechobee was fought Christmas Day, 1837, by General Zachary Taylor, who later became President Zachary Taylor. But under Zachary Taylor, he fought probably the largest contingent of Native Americans in the area, and that included Sam Jones and the Miccosukee Indians, and then all of the bands that were following the Seminoles. They fought a huge pitched battle out there on the banks of the Lake Okeechobee. After that battle, historians thought that since the battle was since Taylor and his U.S. troops were victorious in that battle, it was thought that they chased the Seminoles south and east to this point where they hastily constructed a village. And the Miccosukees just disappeared altogether, and they had no clue what happened to them. Well, what we figured out was that couldn't be true, because if Powell landed here on the 15th, January 15th, 1838, and Taylor's battle was Christmas Day, December 25th, 1837, there wouldn't have been enough time for them to come and build a village and push cattle, raise cattle. They had livestock, they had agriculture, they had beans and squash and pumpkins growing here. So they just didn't have enough time. So what Jeff came to the conclusion, and then sold me on the idea, that this village was here for a long time. So the Seminoles that fought in the Battle of Okeechobee likely came from the Loxahatchee village, which is right where we're at now. And likely there were two villages. There was probably a village for the Seminoles and likely a village for the Black Seminoles. And if you look in the archaeological survey done by Bob Carr, he agrees with that there were two distinct villages here based on the archaeology that came up under the two surveys. So the idea that they were chased here is kind of backwards. The truth, it looks like now, that we want to go with is that the Seminoles had established themselves here long before the Battle of Okeechobee, but then assisted in the Battle of Okeechobee and then returned here. Likely Sam Jones followed canoe trails all the way down to Pine Island, and we know that to be the case because they sent a force under Lieutenant Robert Anderson to build a trail all the way down to the area of the New River, which today is called Fort Lauderdale. When they got there, they also found fields of beans and squash and pumpkins, and evidence that the Miccosukees under Sam Jones or Arpaika had been there possibly for years. So there's a lot of new things that are coming up today. Jeff and I are just thankful to be part of the team that discovered it, and also to be instrumental in helping to preserve this. We hope that our work will not only help to preserve this place for years to come, but help to understand the sacrifice in human lives and in the toll of tragedy that just surrounds this place. People need to remember that forever, and we're hoping that this park is here and tells that story for a long time into the future.
It's sacred ground. We're so grateful that the county did preserve it. Grateful to the county commissioners that had the insight to preserve this part of the park. There's some stuff, more stuff we, at this time, are not able to tell you, but it doesn't really matter. I think we got the most important part, was how the battle was discovered and how it was preserved. And it was rough there for a while there, but history preserved, and we're grateful again for this beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous. Every time I come here, I'm amazed at how beautiful it is, and very grateful that it was preserved.
There's a story that the ancestors who were here want to have told, and it's up to us to keep this piece of history alive. If we don't tell the story, if they are forgotten, then that entire sacrifice is forgotten. So our job from this point on is education, is to get the story out to people, empower people with knowledge, and that knowledge will help possibly avoid, the similar fates in the future. We have to learn lessons from our sacrifices. If we don't, we're doomed to repeating them.
7 federal soldiers were killed here, died here, and were carried across that little fork that I was talking about to the north side of the prong. And we're not sure where they're buried, but we're pretty sure that, as according to Mott, they took him to the north side of the Loxahatchee River. And several more died, were wounded, were brought to Fort Jupiter, where they died too. So Steve knows approximately the number that died from the battle. And the Seminoles carried off their dead. But extremely sad, extremely traumatic, and it is sacred ground. And like I said, this is sacred ground.
Among the Seminoles that were captured at Fort Jupiter, we just recently came across some research done by Ken Hughes, and in the research that he had the original documents where they surveyed each Native American captured, and we counted 154 children under the age of 12 years old that were here during the battle. So I just want you to, for a moment, picture what it must have been like for those 154 children when the soldiers came through, when these rockets and bombs were falling in here, the cannon were firing, soldiers were charging through on their horses. Those children must have been terrified. They must have been absolutely terrified. And this is part of the story that never gets told. It doesn't get told in history books. And
the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears starts right here in Jupiter. Everybody thinks it started in northern Georgia and Carolinas. No, it started right here.
The Indian Removal Act of 1830 meant that under President Andrew Jackson, that all Native Americans east of the Mississippi would be moved west of the Mississippi on reservations, mostly around Oklahoma, or what is today's Oklahoma. So this was part of that federal Indian Removal Act. They came down here to take on the Seminoles, and the Seminoles didn't want to leave. And that's what brought about the 2 battles here. Jeff, anything else?
No, other than I keep saying I'm so grateful that it's preserved. I just still amazed. It's changed a lot since Steve and I were here like 35 years ago. But like I said, all the orange groves are gone. The swamp hickories are gone, but it's the oak trees are still here. The pine trees are still here. It's incredibly beautiful, and
the energy's still here.
The energy's still here. Yes, yeah. Say a prayer for all the Native Americans and the soldiers.